Finally, the first book about a strange and yet strangely common Sasquatch-related experience. I've been expecting to see something like this for years now, a source that responsibly takes on a subject that many reflexively shy away from just because it seems so hard to swallow. So this year I decided to simply write the darn thing myself. It needed to exist, and I have to admit that I'm proud of the outcome. It's a rich book that looks at the phenomenon from many angles. 20 personal testimonials, chapters on experimental evidence for telepathy stretching back decades, chapters on how telepathy can be understood within the context of quantum physics, and much, much more. The book has only been out for a few days, but I've already gotten my first Amazon review, and it says, most serious researchers shy away from dealing with the really strange reports of Sasquatch abilities. This guy, Noël, doesn't. He interviews many people who all have the same kinds of experiences and then goes and tries to figure out what scientists are saying about this kind of thing. I didn't think it was possible, but he made me believe that mind reading is true just because of how much evidence and great experiences he filled this book with. You have to check it out and you'll see I'm right. Contrary to popular belief, there really is a ton of evidence supporting the existence of telepathy as a natural ability, more pronounced in some than in others. The most influential current researcher in this growing field of science is Dean Radin, author of Entangled Minds, a book that seeks to place psychic phenomena within the context of quantum physics.
Well, here's Western sciences down here. It assumes that things are material, that we use objective methods, and the mind, in fact, is equal to the brain. Up here, roughly, is Eastern sciences. It's interested more in energetic or informational aspects of the world rather than material. Subjectivity is held in high regard, and mind is not equal to brain. So these two ways of looking at the world create theoretical boundaries. And you notice that I stuck psi into the Eastern sciences because it is compatible at that level. Whereas in the Western sciences, there's no room for it, and that's what's sustained as a taboo. From trained as a Western scientist, you look at these phenomena, and you cannot imagine any conceivable way that it can fit within the worldview that you were trained to understand. And obviously, that method is very powerful. But maybe Eastern sciences haven't been all that far off the mark either. So in the West, when we look at that object and we say, well, how does that thing work? Our tendency is to take it apart, since that's what reductionism is good for. Well, what if it wasn't a brain that we were looking at, but more like that? It's this object. So from the West, we look at this object which is playing music. And so how do we go about understanding that? Well, the first thing is we imagine that there's music, there's somebody inside there creating the music. So we look for Led Zeppelin inside. We take it apart and we look for them, and we can't find them in there. What we find instead are circuits. And as our methods get better and better, we find that our ability to detect better and better circuitry gets better. And this is what we see in the neurosciences. Our pictures assume that we're seeing reflections of the thing which is generating the music. Somebody from the East would say, no, you've completely misconstrued what's going on here. The object is not generating music, it's receiving it. And now the important point here is that both sides might be right. What we see in the neurosciences are correlations. Well, even in the East, what they talk about are correlations that are going on. We assume the direction of causation based on our theoretical assumptions.
At a friend's house in East Texas, I filmed a Sasquatch peeking from behind a woodpile. I had a thermal camera, and I would occasionally scan the tree line, hoping to see an enormous upright figure. For this reason, the low-to-the-ground horizontal object failed to capture my attention. But upon later review, I saw that it was a left arm. The hand occasionally cupping the pointed end of this board. During my June 2011 visit to the site, a number of astonishing MINDSPEAK episodes took place, not in my own mind, but in that of my friend. And this gradually eroded my more materialistic posture toward reality. I'll detail all of these experiences in the book, but the one I want to share with you today happened on my last morning. I had been there for 5 days, and this was during the height of the horrible 2011 drought that the Southwest was going through. We spent most of the day sitting out on the lawn underneath the shade of her hickory tree and hadn't heard a single wood knock or vocal or tree push or branch break whatsoever during probably 25 hours total sitting outside. So on this last morning, right before I left for the airport, I asked my friend if she could mentally ask the Sasquatch she'd been in touch with in this way, if she could share a goodbye sound for me. My friend kind of looked off into space and then said, "She says to wait." So I'm thinking, okay, well, this isn't going to happen. And I swear to you, within 10 seconds, from about 150 feet off in the forest, we hear. This was the last shred of my skepticism being swatted out of the park like a grand slam home run.
I generated a list of words, and then I had that on my computer, which was out of sight of the boy, and gave the mother, the words one at a time, which were easy for her to remember, because it's a word. And he just typed it out accurately. It's extremely powerful to see this boy just sitting there, like typing like this, and then to see the words show up on the screen. It's chilling,
Yeah.
When I think about consciousness, I'm thinking about there's all this information that's stored in a field. If you think about a magnet and you have a lot of iron filings and you put the magnet on a piece of paper with the iron filings, they will organize themselves around that magnet, okay? But we wouldn't otherwise see the force that magnet has around it if we didn't have those filings there on that piece of paper. And I think of consciousness as being like that. I think of it as being this field that is highly organized, that contains information. And it's in the body and out of the body, both. I mean, it's not contained within the body. It's ridiculous to me to say that it's just contained within the brain. I mean, it's not only the evidence that suggests against that, but it's the fact that those are people who are just thinking of the brain in the most concrete way. They're thinking of it as a bunch of chemicals. And so if what you're thinking about is how does this bag of chemicals communicate with this bag of chemicals, it doesn't work that way. If that's really how you think of the brain, it's just like, like what you buy at the grocery store, in the organ section, you just think of it as being that. Of course it can't be telepathic.
The video you're looking at shows the experimental setup we had last spring. Haley, a 10-year-old severely autistic child, and her therapist are seated alone in the room, together at a table and separated by a tall partition that prevents eye-to-eye or physical contact. Cards with randomized numbers, words, sentences, pictures, and equations were hidden until the experiment. The therapist viewed them one by one on her side of the visual barrier and then asked Haley what she was thinking or looking at. Haley pointed with her wooden pencil inside characters on stencils with her right hand to select them, and then entered them with her left into a device that converts text to speech. You'll notice that there are no characters for division signs, equal signs, or decimal points, so the therapist had to tell Haley when these occurred. You'll also notice that her answer is 100% accurate on 18 out of 18 digits. This is just one of 10 equations that she did in a 10-minute period, with accuracy above 90% each time.
But if what it is it's an informational field, then it can be in contact with other informational fields.
In his book and in his lectures, Dean Radin lays out numerous experiments that have shown a statistically significant psychic effect in a variety of different methods and arenas. What we're interested in is just telepathy and in the synergy that can exist between two minds.
There should be correlations between people's brains who are isolated. And so you can do an experiment of the following type. You have to take two people, you isolate them, you have them think about each other. You get some sort of a light flashing stimulus to create evoked potentials in one person's brain, and you look in the other person's brain and see whether you get an effect. Very simple. So here's how we did it up at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. We have our fancy shielded room. We put the receiver in there and measured a single cortical measure. The sender is at a distance looking at a blank screen, and every so often the face of the other person pops up for a few seconds, and then it goes away. So that does two things. It does a visual stimulus. It creates a light flash, which will create an evoked potential in her brain. And it also reminds her what the nature of the task is, namely, you're trying to connect to your friend at a distance. So the experimental data looks like this. This is based on 13 couples. The sender's brain gets a big evoked response just about at the right time scale that you'd expect. And the receiver's brain also showed a peak at that point. If you do a correlation and do the proper statistics, you end up with a statistically significant correlation in time between the two brains. Now this is, the sender's brain, of course, is completely expected. The receiver's brain is not, because the receiver is sitting in a dark room and nothing's happening. And by the way, the receiver never reports anything either. In this case, the receiver is not reporting seeing weird flickering lights or anything. She reports nothing. Another study was published by some colleagues at the University of Edinburgh where they looked at overall level of activation in the brain. So the light flashes here, roughly 200 milliseconds later, there's a lot of activity in the brain and sort of dies away. What's happening in the composite brain of the receivers? As it turns out, there's an interesting activation that rises in the receivers, which peaks around 200 milliseconds as well. Again, the receivers don't report anything here. This is all unconscious, but nevertheless, their central nervous system is running in time sync with what's going on in the senders.
So I will set out in my book to persuade readers that this ability, telepathy, obviously exists in our own species. And based on countless reports, it appears in an elevated or more concentrated fashion in our next of kin, in Sasquatch. We don't yet know why this is the case, but many years now of talking to witnesses and experiencers, habituators, have placed me well beyond doubt on this front. Long term, we will become clear on how it all works. The best thinking today is that the explanation lies within the natural laws of physics, which are quickly being expanded as our understanding grows. A central realization that I'm going to focus on is that objects in reality are much more interconnected and that reality itself is more coherent than we ever suspected. The kind of star witness for this is what's known as quantum entanglement. This astonishing and really counterintuitive feature of nature has been demonstrated repeatedly now at the subatomic particle level. But there is increasing evidence that it can play a role as well at a more macro level. And this level, of course, is where minds exist.
This is how it works. When two subatomic particles interact, they can become entangled. That means their spin, position, or other properties become linked through a process unknown to modern science.
If you then make a measurement of one of the particles, then that instantaneously determines what the behavior of the other particle should be. And when the experiment is done, it's found that indeed the other particle's quantum state is exactly determined once you've made a measurement of the partner particle's quantum state.
That means if a scientist observes one entangled particle and forces it to spin clockwise, the other entangled particle will immediately start spinning in the opposite direction. That seems intriguing, but it's hardly earth-shattering until you consider that the two entangled particles can be separated by billions of light years. And still, the moment you observe one particle's spin, you've dictated the other particle's spin.
I don't understand it. I don't know that anyone does. Spooky action at a distance, as Einstein called it.
If you watch that episode, you'll watch me walking out of the forest at night, and I'm feeling very Survivorman, kind of cocky and like, yeah, I got this down, no problem. And I'm walking along, and I say to the camera, I say, "Ooh, I got that feeling on the back of my neck." Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to shrink from this. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop and see what happens. Let's see what happens. Let's see what the boogeyman is. Come and get me. And then I'm like, okay, well, the feeling's gone now. Nothing happened. Might as well keep walking out. Mm-hmm. Well, what also happened was I was instantly stopped and hit in my head with basically, I don't know what you want to call it. I mean, I'm hesitating, obviously. You can tell I'm being shy about it and hesitating, but it was a voice, just instantly, really strong. And I mean, it was so strong that afterwards, when I went home, I went and talked to a few people, and I said, look, I want to know, am I messing with, like, schizophrenia here? Like, what's this? I heard something that I've never experienced before in my life, and basically what I heard was, we're right over here. We're 2 hills away from you. If you want to see us, stay. I literally said, I answered in my brain, but I answered, I said, you know what? I'm not ready. Because you got to think, at this point, I'm filming films about what I think is maybe Gigantopithecus, a hominid species with some, a cool ability to be stealthy and hide from us in the forests of North America, around the world. That's what I think I'm filming. And then I come out, and this stuff is happening before people are telling me about all these other attributes. This stuff that happened on its own, without that influence, without the power of suggestion. Then I start interviewing more people, and all these, identical stories start popping up, and I'm like, crap, I'm down the rabbit hole now.